These 30 maps of Europe are explaining everything. Believe me, this first map will surprise you. These are all the countries in Europe sorted by their life expectancies. Darker red color means lower life expectancy. However, as you may already realize, there is something odd with this map. In fact, this is what the data looked like 75 years ago. If we move fast forward to these days, it is unbelievable how better life is today. People are expected to live for 15 years more in most of the countries. Citizens of Liechtenstein and Switzerland live on average 84 years, which is the longest in entire Europe. Nevertheless, the gap between Western and Eastern Europe is still visible. Despite all other factors, at the end of the day, the more money you have, the longer you live. And this map is an example of that. This time, the darkest blue color means the highest nominal GDP of a country. Once again, we can spot the Western domination. It has its roots mainly in history. Meanwhile, countries in the Balkans are among the poorest. What may surprise you is that Russia has the 5th biggest economy in Europe, bigger than Spain's and almost at the same level as economy in Italy. But does that mean that Russians live wealthier lives than Spanish people? Well, watch the change in the map when we switch to GDP per capita. Now it is more evident whose citizens have access to more wealth. Some countries have truly strong economies, while others are holding strong only thanks to big amounts of the working population. Great change is visible in countries such as Norway, Iceland or Ireland. Although their nominal GDP is under the European average, the map of GDP per capita shows that they are among the wealthiest on this continent. In fact, the population of each country directly affects all other statistics. That's why it's important to know where the people are. In this case, a darker shade means more people. A European is a broad term, as there are 44 different countries. Despite that, there are definitely more Europeans in France, the United Kingdom, or the most populous country in Europe, Russia. Although it's debatable how big portion of the Russian population is actually European. On the other hand, the Scandinavian and Baltic countries are among the emptiest. And yet, I have even better map explaining the population of Europe for you. This is the population density. The most people-packed countries are the darkest ones. Now it's even more evident how empty the north and northeast actually are. On the other hand, the Central Europe is the most densely populated region. The perfect climate and easy-to-live conditions are probably the biggest contributors. But if you feel like a sardine living in some of the most densely populated countries, just wait a few years. As Europeans are dying out, the decline in population growth, as represented by red color in this map, is a problem affecting most of European countries. Latvia and Lithuania are among the worst affected of them all. Their population is shrinking by 1% every year. On average, European population declines by 0.1% every year, and this situation is still worsening. In comparison, Africa's population grew by 2.37% in the last year. One reason for the declining population could be the fact that Europeans are alcoholics. At least from the global point of view, people in Europe consume the most alcohol. And on this map, we can spot who the biggest culprits are. Yes, everyone is guilty. The darker color signifies more liters of pure alcohol consumed by an average adult. It seems that even though people in Eastern Europe are poorer, they always find the money for alcohol. Or I guess they maybe make it themselves. And still, the preferences of alcohol change throughout the continent. People from Southern Europe tend to have a glass of wine with everything, given the perfect conditions they have for growing grapes. The Central Europeans prefers their beer, and they like to consume it in huge quantities. In fact, the Czech Republic is the biggest consumer of beer in the world. The average Czech drinks around 130 liters of this delicious beverage per year. And the northern you go, the more spirits there are. Vodka is among the most preferred spirits in all of these countries. Alcohol may cause a lot of trouble. One of the worst scenarios could be a murder. These are the European countries sorted by number of intentional homicides per year. Lighter orange means a lower chance for you to get murdered. You can definitely calm down if you live in Iceland, Italy, Slovakia or Slovenia, as they have the lowest homicides rates in all of Europe. On the other end of the spectrum are Russia, Ukraine, Montenegro and Latvia. We are talking about Northern, Southern or Central Europe. But what region does this actually mean? In fact, it depends on who you ask. These are the official regions of Europe according to United Nations. But in reality, this division is no more accurate than, for example, this one. This goes into more detail, making Central Europe its own region and splitting the South into West, Middle and East. But Europe as a complex and diverse continent has formed one of the strongest unions in the world. This map depicts the European Union. As of today, it consists of 27 states, with 9 more countries being recognized as candidates for the membership. So, even though it may be confusing for some, Europe and European Union are two different things. But to make it more complicated, there are even more unions. Schengen area is one of them. Although it's not exactly a union, it consists of 29 European countries that have officially abolished border controls at their mutual borders to simplify trade and traveling throughout Europe. But the involved countries differ from the EU countries, in spite of looking almost the same. Switzerland is an example of a country that is part of Schengen, but not a member of the European Union. Meanwhile, Ireland is the exact opposite. And since Ireland is in European Union, its official currency is euro. And the same is true for all of these countries. In fact, each country that joined the European Union is obligated to use the euro as the official currency. Despite that, the following 7 countries still haven't done so and continue to use their own currencies. Denmark is the only EU country to have an exception for using its original currency. Meanwhile, Kosovo and Montenegro are using euro as their de facto currency, despite not being in the European Union. The last important and widely known union is NATO. North Atlantic Treaty Organization is an international military alliance consisting of these 29 European countries, plus Turkey, Canada and the USA. Its ultimate goal is shared military defense. If any armed attack occurs against one of the member states, it shall be considered as an attack against all of them. And once again, the NATO members in Europe are different from those of the European Union or Schengen. Now look at this map. This is probably the biggest group of European countries that all have one thing in common. And this is pretty rare, as it's sometimes almost impossible to find similarity among European nations. All of these countries are the official enemies of Russia, according to the Russian government itself. Well, looking from this perspective, it doesn't seem like the best place for Russia to call home. Now, when we understand the regions and unions in the European continent, let's explore the people themselves. As most of the nations have their own individual language, it's better to group them into wider families. Looking at this map, you can better understand why Polish can easily understand Czechs, Slovaks or Ukrainians, as all of their languages are part of the Slavic group. Or the fact that Spanish shares a big part of vocabulary and grammar with Italian. All of these languages are part of the Indo-European language family. But you can spot these 3 black sheep, as Hungarian, Estonian and Finnish languages are part of the Uralic language family, which is completely different from the rest of the languages in Europe. That's why Hungarian is often the target of jokes by its mostly Slavic neighbors. Speaking is one thing, but writing is another, and alphabet is another thing upon which Europeans cannot agree. Luckily, most of the continent uses the classic Latin alphabet, the one you know from English. However, Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, Bulgaria and North Macedonia all use the Cyrillic alphabet. which looks like this. Meanwhile, some of the Balkan countries still haven't decided which one they want to use. The Greeks stuck to the tradition and have been using their unique alphabet for almost 3000 years. Not only everybody speaks differently, but everybody looks different as well. The next map will tell us where the most obese Europeans live. A darker red color means a higher percentage of the obese population. Croatia, Hungary and Malta are at the top of this rating with almost 30% of their population battling obesity. On the other end are Italy, France or Spain. It seems that the Mediterranean diet is rightly called one of the healthiest diets in the world. The size around the waist is one thing, the size from the ground to the top of your head is another. And Europe is home to the tallest people in the world. Bosnia and Herzegovina is actually the tallest country in the world, with an average male height of unbelievable 184 centimeters. Among the smallest are Spanish, Italians and Albanians with 174 centimeters. That makes 10 centimeter difference, even though the distance between Bosnia and Albania is only 100 kilometers. Another amounts we can compare are the amounts of euros in the wallet of every European. These are the minimum wages across the European countries. And once again the huge economic gap between Western and Eastern Europe is visible at first sight. Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova and Kosovo are among the poorest countries in Europe, according to this statistic. An ordinary Dutchman earns at least 14 times more than an ordinary Ukrainian. Well, the world is sometimes unfair. It is fascinating how this map perfectly correlates with the previous one. This is the map of the democracy index. In other words, the blue countries have the highest quality of democracy, which consists of political freedom, independent judiciary, absence of censorship, and more. The northern countries are absolute democratic winners, even on a global scale. The idea of democracy gets flawed the further east and south you go. Now check out this one. Can you guess what is this map about just from the statistics? These are the most and least visited countries in Europe by the number of tourist arrivals. To get a better picture, I used data from 2019, right before the world went crazy. France is the ultimate winner, not only in Europe but worldwide as well. But Spain is not that far behind. On the other hand, if you prefer less crowded places, I can recommend you visit Moldova, which is the least visited country in Europe. On average, France gets 826 times more tourists than Moldova. If you plan to travel to Europe, this one might come in handy as well. This map shows how likely it is to get food as a guest in each European country. It is well known that Europeans from the south are more warm and welcoming, even though you barely know each other, while people from north tend to be more cold and close to foreigners. But I'm sure that there is the same goodness in them as well. You just might have to unfreeze it a bit. Europe is mostly a secular continent. This means that religion is a separate entity from politics. The overall reason for this is that the importance of religion is on a huge decline across most of the European countries. This map shows the percentage of population that considers religion as important in each of them. Among the most religious ones are Poland, Portugal, and many countries in the Balkans. And if you believe, it is important in what you believe. This is the map of prevalent religions across Europe. The majority of Europeans are Catholics, but they also range from Protestants in the north, Orthodox Christians in the east, to the only Islamic countries in Europe, which are Albania, Kosovo, and partially Bosnia and Herzegovina. Let's move to the finals. In better words, to the World Cup finals. These are all the countries in Europe that have won the FIFA World Cup at least once. Meanwhile, France managed to win this prestige cup even twice. But the best European footballers, according to this statistic, live in Germany and Italy, as both countries have won the World Cup 4 times. And since we already talked about sports, let's take a look at our last statistic of today. These are the European countries sorted by the number of their Olympic medals. We are talking about each and every medal from both the Summer and the Winter Olympic Games. And That's amazing. To learn even more about our world, continue to this video next. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.